The history of U.S. interventions in Venezuela is marked by a series of strategic moves aimed at maintaining influence over this oil-rich nation. The story begins in the early 20th century, during the 1910s to 1940s, when American oil companies like Standard Oil and Gulf established significant economic control over Venezuela's oil fields. At this time, the U.S. government chose to support the regime of Juan Vicente Gómez, enabling these companies to exploit the country's resources with minimal restrictions. This intervention was primarily economic in nature, avoiding military confrontation while solidifying U.S. interests in the region. As the Cold War unfolded from the 1950s to the 1990s, the geopolitical landscape shifted significantly. The United States focused on supporting pro-U.S. governments that aligned with its anti-communist agenda. Leaders like Rómulo Betancourt, Carlos Andrés Pérez, and Rafael Caldera received American backing, contingent upon their commitment to opposing leftist movements. The U.S. provided assistance in training security and intelligence forces to combat armed left-wing groups, intertwining political, military, and economic interventions as it sought to maintain its influence in Venezuelan politics. One of the most well-documented interventions occurred in April 2002, when the U.S. supported a coup against Hugo Chávez. On April 11, Chávez was temporarily overthrown after a collaboration between segments of the military and economic elites. In the immediate aftermath, Washington recognized the interim government led by Pedro Carmona. Declassified documents later revealed a systematic effort by U.S. agencies, including the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, and USAID, to train and fund anti-Chávez groups. This intervention represents a direct political maneuver, albeit without overt military action. From 2002 to 2010, U.S. interventions took a more subtle form. Diplomatic pressure and financial support targeted opposition groups, NGOs, and independent media critical of Chávez. Initial sanctions were imposed on Venezuelan officials, drawing accusations of destabilization from Caracas. This soft power approach included media warfare and targeted restrictions aimed at undermining Chávez's government while avoiding outright military conflict. In 2015, under President Obama, Venezuela was officially declared a national security threat. This executive order served as a catalyst for more stringent economic sanctions designed to cripple the Venezuelan economy. The U.S. positioned itself for deeper intervention by framing the Venezuelan regime as a threat to regional stability, pursuing diplomatic and economic strategies to apply pressure on the Maduro government. The situation escalated under President Trump, who, in 2017, imposed massive economic sanctions on Venezuela. These sanctions included prohibiting the purchase of Venezuelan debt and placing restrictions on the state-owned oil company, PDVSA. The strategy aimed to exert maximum pressure on Nicolás Maduro, seeking to force his exit from power. The consequences of these sanctions were severe, leading to a collapse of national financing and exacerbating the existing humanitarian crisis in the country. In early 2019, the U.S. pivoted to recognize Juan Guaidó as the legitimate president of Venezuela following his self-proclamation. This recognition came with significant consequences, including the freezing of approximately $7 billion in PDVSA assets within the United States. Moreover, control of Citgo, the U.S. refinery owned by PDVSA, was transferred to the Washington-backed opposition, marking a notable increase in U.S. political and economic intervention in Venezuela. That same year, an attempted indirect military operation unfolded, often referred to as the Bay of Piglets. A private invasion led by SilverCorp USA, involving a group of former soldiers, aimed to capture Maduro. However, the operation was thwarted almost immediately, resulting in several mercenaries being arrested. Although the U.S. government did not officially support the endeavor, it was organized from Florida, highlighting the ongoing complexities of American involvement in Venezuela. Between 2020 and 2021, the United States ramped up its maximum sanctions and international pressure on Venezuela, enforcing an oil embargo and issuing verbal military threats from certain officials. The U.S. provided logistical support to neighboring countries opposed to Maduro, including Colombia and Brazil under Jair Bolsonaro, further entrenching its efforts to isolate and destabilize the Maduro administration. As the global landscape shifted due to the war in Ukraine, by 2022, the U.S. began to ease some of its pressures on Venezuela. This change was largely motivated by the need to address the energy crisis resulting from the conflict. Washington reopened dialogue with Maduro with the aim of restarting Venezuelan oil production. Temporary licenses were granted to Chevron, with the stipulation that the Venezuelan government would commit to holding more democratic elections. This conditional approach signifies a potential shift in U.S. strategy, reflecting the pragmatic considerations of energy needs on the global stage amid geopolitical tensions. Throughout these decades, U.S. intervention in Venezuela has evolved through various phases, adapting to changes in political dynamics and economic necessities. From economic exploitation and covert support for favorable regimes to direct political recognition of opposition figures and crippling sanctions, U.S. involvement has played a critical role in shaping the trajectory of Venezuela's governance and international relations. The complex interplay between American interests and Venezuelan sovereignty continues to define this tumultuous history, as each intervention leaves a lasting imprint on the nation's political landscape and the lives of its people.